Thank you for joining us here this week at windsurftudes.com. So what we're going to be covering this week is something that's pretty essential to every Windows network. In fact, you cannot have a functioning Active Directory network in Windows without DNS. Now, DNS can appear to be fairly complicated at first glance. If you just take a little bit of time and you think about all the processes that DNS has, just kind of slowly and break it down if you're not familiar with it, DNS is really not that complicated. So before we get into any sort of technical things on how we're going to right click and set up different zones in our network, I just want to give you a little overview of DNS and just kind of a conceptual kind of glancing over. If you are already very familiar with DNS, then you can skip this little bit of rambling. So imagine, if you will, that you have a cell phone. And a cell phone is a physical device, just like your servers are in your data center. Then on your cell phone, you have your phone number. And everybody knows that you get new cell phones every year or so, but the phone number stays the same. So the phone number is a logical address. The same thing with your computer's IP address. It's a logical address that we put on a physical piece of hardware. Well, before everybody had phone books in their phone, there used to be the physical phone book. And DNS is kind of like a phone book, whether it's digital or the old school yellow pages. Essentially, when you went to the phone book, you would look up your friend Joe Bob or whatever his name was. Then you would go across the little line and see his phone number. Then you would dial the number, and then you would get the phone ringing on the other end. DNS is exactly like that. When let's say your web browser types in windsurftudes.com, your web browser is going out. It's asking the DNS server, Mr. DNS server, please will you tell me what the IP address of windsurftudes.com is? The DNS server will give your computer the IP address of my website, and then your system will go to the actual IP address where my website's hosted at. So that's how DNS works. So there's a couple of different records within DNS that we will really need to know, and there'll be a couple that you will work with much more frequently than others. The one you will probably most frequently work with is something called an A name. And we'll just show you here. So in this scenario, we have our Active Directory environment set up. We're actually going to be creating a whole new domain. And you can see what we have is we have server names, and we have host, a name, it's the type here, and then we have data, which is an IP address. So as you can see, this is simply a mapping of what we have named our servers to an IP address. All right? Now, there's a couple other things that you will probably end up working with, especially if you set up websites, and that is called a CNAME or a canonical name. And what a CNAME allows you to do is like www dot your website, and then it sometimes if you go to a small hosting provider, the URL won't actually work. If you type www.domainname.com, you actually have to type HTTP. So a CNAME allows you to do different things like that, and it allows you just to have kind of various surnames for what you're trying to do. There is a SRV record. And to show you an SRV record, really what that does is it just points to services that are hosted in the domain. So as you can see here, we have this _GC service record, and what this is actually pointing to is the global catalog service that Active Directory is running. And you can see here it's using port 3268. You can see DC1 and DC2 are offering that record. We have the Kerberos service on port 88 that these two domain controllers. So any sort of service that you can think of, we could put in a service record. You might have what's called an MX record, and what an MX record is a mail exchange record. So there are multiple different types of mail protocols, but if you wanted somebody to be able to find your mail server, you would need the appropriate MX record so that the client could find your mail server. Then lastly, there's what's called a PTR record. And you can think of it as a record but backwards. So usually you would know a domain name like windsurftoots.com and need an IP address. But if you have an IP address and you need to know the domain that matches to it, that would be a utilization of the PTR record. It stands for a pointer record. You can use it for things like an NS lookup. So what we're going to do is we are actually going to set up a new domain and a PTR record just to show you how these are working. And then what we're going to do to prove to you that they're working, we have our IIS server here that we have our WSUS server installed. So we are actually going to set up an intranet site for our Active Directory users to use. And we're going to create the DNS for this site. So you're going to see the whole thing work, including the PTR record, which is not necessarily needed, but I'll show it to you anyway. So basically what we're going to do is the forward lookup is what we're going to be working with. And so we're going to simply right click and we're going to create new zone. And you'll come to this wizard here. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to leave the default here. It's going to be a primary zone. There are a couple other zones. If you were not integrated into Active Directory, and let's say you had web servers out in a DMZ that you needed, you would not want to integrate them with Active Directory, and then you would be utilizing these primary and secondary zones. So if you are going to be doing your own web hosting, I recommend that you look at these and how they are used. But for this, we are only going to be dealing with an intranet website, so we're just going to leave the defaults. And we are again going to leave the default. We're going to allow this zone replication to all of the servers in the domain controllers in our windsurftoots.wst network. So you could do the forest, but we don't have a forest. We're just going to do the domain controllers. We do actually have a forest, but it's not applicable. And this zone name, I'm going to call it intranet.wst. And make sure you haven't fat fingered here because it's important. So just intranet.wst. So when users type intranet.wst into their web browser, they're going to go to our website. So click next. And we do not want dynamic updates because this is not going to be changing. The IP address of our website will not be changing. And that's it. It's pretty simple, right? So now we have this zone, and it looks remarkably similar, maybe a little less populated, but it's got some of the same stuff that our Active Directory has in it. So now what we're going to do is we are going to right click in this pane here, and we are going to be working with first the most common name, the A or the quad A name. And the difference between an A and a quad A name is that an A name is for an IPv6 address, and the the A name is for an IPv4 address, and the quad A is for IPv6. Okay? So what we're going to do is I know that the IP address of our server that we're going to be using is 10.10.10.102. Okay, so we will be creating a PTR record, but not for this website. We do not want to allow any authenticated user to update the record because this should not change. So what we're going to do is we're going to add host, and as you can see, that's it. It's as easy as that to add a host. So now we're going to click Done. So what we're going to do is to test this out, this intranet.wst. As you can see, we have our default website, and that's what the WSUS server is running on. And if we come to our IIS admin page, and you can just access that by going Start, Administrative Tools, and then IIS, the IIS Manager. Okay, we're going to right click on the site, and we're going to do Add Website. And we are going to call this site intranet.wst. And the physical path, so if you've ever dealt with Windows, the default place where Windows holds its web files is in inetpub www root. And you will see that I have created just a little folder in here called intranet. So that's the physical path. And the host name is intranet.wst. So we're going to do OK. So we're just going to recycle this to make sure that it starts here. And as you can see, it's very quick. So now we've added this intranet.wst in our DNS, and we've added this intranet.wst website. And what I want you to take a look at is if you right click on the website, take a careful look at this edit bindings. So if you look at this edit bindings, we are looking, and this host name is going to be called intranet.wst. This actually allows us to bind multiple websites to a single IP address. So instead of having one IP address per website, we get a lot of value of our IP addresses. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to our domain controller, and we are going to go http://intranet.wst. And look, welcome to intranet.windsurvetoots.wst, and I'll actually show you the little file on this web server, just so you can know for sure that that's where we're at. So let's just take a look at it, and you can see the same thing here. Welcome to intranet.windsurvetoots.wst. So now, if you have worked with DNS at all, you know that there is a tool called NS lookup. And so this tool, it's a command line tool, NS lookup. So this is going to tell us where is this intranet.wst pointing to. And so we're going to execute this command, and it will point to, just take it a second. So look, it is exactly going to where we pointed it, 10.10.10.102. So now we're going to talk about those PTR records. So what if we only had our IP address, NS lookup, and we only know that, like, let's say our intrusion detection system was getting, IP packets from 10.10.10.102. Well, if we do an NS lookup, oh, we don't know where it's coming from. It's unknown. So what we're going to do, in order to do this reverse resolve, we're going to go into this reverse lookup zones. We are going to do new zone, and this is going to be a primary zone. And yes, this can be stored in Active Directory because we're internal to our network. And we're going to select the same defaults. And this is going to be IPv4. Okay, this is one thing, we're not using IPv6 addresses. And the network ID is going to be 10.10.10. So this is our network address, okay, our subnet that we're working on. So we're going to go next. And yeah, we'll actually allow dynamic updates because our DNS servers can use this if it's enabled, or our DHCP servers can use this if it's enabled. So we can leave this as the default. And we're going to click Finish. So now you can see we have a start of authority in an NS record. Now what we're going to do is right click, and we're going to create what's called a new PTR record. Okay, and this is the record that's the opposite of our A record. So it's going to go from IP address to logical domain name. The A record goes from logical domain name to the IP address. So as you can see, it's asking us for the host IP address. And so we are going to tell it, it already gave us the first 3 octets, so we're going to point to 102. And the name of that server is W2K8R1, because this is a Windows 2008, our version 1 box, app01, and that's the server name, and then our domain name, winsrvtoots.wst. Okay? So we're going to select that. Now we're going to go right back to that command line that we had, and we're going to run this NS lookup again, and let's look at the difference and see what happens. Let's run this, and boom! Oh, hold on, it timed out. Give it just a second. Let me. You can do what's called ipconfig and flush DNS. I got a little excited. Okay, so that's flushed. And let's take a look. And so here we go. So, oh, it actually did show us before. My bad. So Win2K8R1 app01.windsurvetoots.wst. So when we did this the first time, it didn't have any information. See right here, no information on the host name. And then we scroll down a little bit. And then after we added that PTR record, here we got it. W2K8R1 app01.windsurftoots.wst. So this proves that this PTR record allows us to go from IP address back to host name. So now let's take a little quick look and see what happens. And I'm going to do www. Take my caps off, intranet.wst. And we get a lot of nothing. So let's try it again. www. Nope, I don't want to go to Bing. Nope, I don't want to search. Thank you, Microsoft. So we got a lot of nothing. So let's try it again. Intranet.wst. And nope, just going to Bing again to search. Gotta love those default search providers. So what are we going to do here? We want to be able to use this www name. So what we're going to do is we are going to add a new alias or a C name, okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to do the fully qualified domain name. And this alias, so we're going to do www right there. See how now we have this fully qualified domain name, www.intranet.wst. And what we're going to do is we're going to point right back to that host again. So we're going to go w2k8r1 app01.windsurftoots.wst. Okay. Now we're going to have to do something back on our web server to accept this. Okay. And actually this may work or it may not. So let's go www.intranet.wst. So again, we don't have any connection. It's not pulling anything up. It's going right to Bing. No, we don't want to go to you, Bing. Leave us alone. Okay. So what we're going to do here is on our intranet website, we are going to go to that edit bindings. And we're going to add a binding. So it's an HTTP address, and we're going to go www.intranet.wst. And so there we go. We're going to go close. And let's just flush our DNS just one more time. Okay, so we're flush our DNS here. And now when we do www.intranet.wst, we should bring up our page, www.intranet.wst. Okay, so there we go. So now we have our simple HTTP going, intranet.wst. It's going there, and we have our www. And remember, on the web server, we had to go through and edit the bindings for that. Okay, so close that out. So this will give you a pretty decent overview of setting up DNS. Just one more thing that you want to think about: if you are not using or if you are not hosting your own website for your company, this may be something of interest to you. So you shouldn't, if you're not hosting your own websites, have any DNS servers that are out in your DMZ. But what you can do is, when this finishes thinking here, you can use something that's called DNS forwarders. So if you are maintaining DNS servers for your Active Directory, you don't need to be receiving all these DNS names from all these other companies. So let's say you have a T1 or a business class DSL connection. So in my case, I have a connection through Comcast, as you can see here. So what a forwarder would be is you have your internal DNS systems that host just DNS information about your environment. And then if your clients needed to go somewhere, let's say like Google.com, your servers don't need to store information about Google.com. So what you would do is you would forward their request to the DNS servers provided for you by your internet service provider. You may even utilize some DNS services provided by your internet service provider, even if you want to host your own website. Now, why I would recommend this is DNS can be a fairly insecure protocol. There are a lot of attacks that can take place, poisoning DNS, trying to perform denial of services on DNS, things like that. And so you may want to utilize, and usually it's very cheap, the ISP, their DNS service to point back to your web servers. That is a perfectly acceptable option. So you do not have to maintain internet facing DNS systems. But if you do, that's maybe another tutorial. So I just wanted to show you about these. That way, in your Active Directory and in your DNS system, you can forward out requests to DNS service provided by your IP address. Thank you for bearing with me on that little CNAME snafu. Sometimes it does take a couple minutes to update. So thank you again for joining us here on windsurftoots.com. If you like the videos, please post on our YouTube channel or on our website. And always, as always, drop a suggestion for some videos that you would like to see. Thanks again for watching here on windsurftoots.com.